Good day everyone, and welcome to the channel. It's Londononion here with our third Back 4 Blood critical comparison. And the weapons we'll be comparing and contrasting today are the Uzi and the Vector SMGs. Now, just some housekeeping before we dissect these weapons. It is important to state the parameters of this critical comparison. First, because of the versatility of deck builds, such as the ones that precede this video, weapons can be morphed into variants that increase strengths or balance out needs according to one's playstyle, and will only complicate the comparison. So deck build potential will be of minimal consideration. Second, comparison will take place under two main themes: bare bones and fully kitted, which will be explained as we go through the comparison. Lastly, the weapons will be compared based on their common rarity, just for consistency and simplicity. However, I am aware that performance scaling between rarities may create different results if compared at higher levels. At the end, I will state my preference, and I would encourage anybody with opposing or agreeable views to share which of the two weapons they prefer and why. With that, let us get started. To begin our comparison, we're first going to be analyzing the weapons from a bare bones perspective, meaning absolutely no attachments or modifiers of any kind. Now, this may be a case of deja vu, but looking at the stats of these weapons, the Vector seems to beat the Uzi in virtually every regard, aside from mobility. However, numbers and the practical use of a weapon may possibly create a different result. For those who are present during our comparison between the AK-47 and the SCAR, you'll know what I'm talking about. Now, both weapons are automatic, which is to be expected with SMGs. A stark difference between the two weapons is their magazine capacity. The Vector sits at a minor 19 units per magazine, while the Uzi has a major lead, sitting at 32 rounds per magazine. At the same time though, the Vector inflicts more damage per shot. The Uzi delivers 10 units of damage, meanwhile the Vector deals 11. Now, of course, there is the valid question of which one inflicts more damage. It doesn't take much Einstein math to determine that shot for shot, the Vector overtakes the Uzi. Mag for mag, however, the Uzi easily overcomes the Vector. The Uzi will inflict a grand total of 320 damage units within its effective range, 7 meters, while the Vector will inflict a grand total of 209 units per mag within its effective range, that being 9 meters. These numbers may be different from the ones presented in my previous reviews and deck builds ever since our February 2022 update. Now, I consider both of these weapons to be in what I refer to as the danger zone as far as their effective range, so I won't go too much into range effectiveness, but this is still worth consideration. Continuing on, although the damage numbers are different for these weapons, their mag capacity, reload speed, and fire rate demand investigation. To do this, I decided to experiment with their damage over time. Although the Uzi will do more damage mag for mag, the ultimate question is whether the Vector's speed will eventually pay off over the Uzi. First, looking at the reload speed of both weapons, the Uzi will take a minor 2.2 seconds approximately to reload before becoming fire ready. The Vector, on the other hand, will take approximately 2.5 seconds before becoming fire ready. This does give the Uzi an advantage, however, this is only one constituent. The Vector, after all, has a smaller mag by 13 rounds, meaning that it will start its next mag much faster. With that said, this can only be significant if the fire rates are unmatched in the Vector's favor. If they are matched, then we'll have to determine the damage lead, if there is one. Continuing on with the experiments, to determine which has the faster fire rate, both weapons will empty their mags at the same time. Since the Uzi has a 13 round lead, I decided to use this as a benchmark for faster or slower fire rate of the Vector. Based on the example shown, the Vector begins its reload just as the Uzi reaches 13 rounds remaining. This essentially means that both weapons have congruent fire rates. With that said, we'll now look at the overlapping damage by the Vector. Based on the demonstration, the Vector will lead by 10 rounds from its subsequent magazine before the Uzi begins to inflict its damage. With 11 units of damage per shot, this will add an additional 110 units of damage. Adding this on top of the previous mag damage, this will bring the Vector to a maximum of 319 damage units. I say maximum because it shares the same fire rate as the Uzi, while suffering a lower reload speed. This ultimately means that 319 damage units is the closest the Vector will get to the Uzi's damage over time. Afterwards, the Uzi will begin to take off, but slowly. Technically, this is a marginal difference in damage over time, but it is still an advantage nonetheless in the Uzi's favor. The only way the Vector can equalize this is with its slightly superior range advantage, but as stated earlier, both weapons are most effective in the danger zone, or under 10 meters of a given target. Now moving on, there is more to a weapon than just damage. Handling is a major part of firing a weapon effectively. Just scratching at the surface, there is a significant difference in how each weapon performs. The Vector is relatively more tame than the Uzi. When firing automatically, the Uzi has significant muzzle flash, greater recoil, and high shakiness for lack of better term. Going a bit deeper, when testing out automatic fire deviation, the Vector remains relatively consistent with far fewer and tighter deviations than the Uzi, which is much less predictable and will create greater stress on controlling the weapon. As far as shot reliability goes, I performed a test using 3 mags from each weapon on a target 18 meters away, using single shots on the head of a given target to maximize their accuracy. Based on the results, the Vector had greater shot-to-hit reliability, giving the Vector an overall advantage in handling. Additionally, the Vector has significantly higher reliability in hipfire, as the crosshairs will remain tight enough for a target 10 meters away. The Uzi, on the other hand, will struggle to hit most of its rounds. Now, the last area to test between these weapons is the mobility. Based on the stats, the Uzi is superior in mobility by 10 units, whatever that means. However, when testing out move speed while aiming down the sights, the Vector manages to reach a waypoint faster than the Uzi. Without ADS, however, the Uzi takes the win, which at least aligns with the weapon's stats in comparison. Moving on to the fully kitted side of the comparison, this part won't be as long and technical, since the attachments are consistent and will garner the same results if the weapons are dressed congruently. The practical use of the weapon, however, is where the heart of the discussion is. A fully kitted weapon, meaning all purple or higher attachments, will garner very different results for each weapon. Now, in this onion's opinion, adding attachments to a weapon is mainly about compensating for its shortcomings, rather than competing with another weapon of comparison. So, for barrel attachments, both weapons can primarily benefit from a long barrel to extend their effective range and allow maximum damage outside of the danger zone. For the Uzi, however, a compensator is also an option to increase its ease of use while allowing its magazine capacity to compensate for the loss in damage while remaining outside of the danger zone. One's choice of card selection, however, could influence this. Moving on to the magazine attachment, despite the Vector having a relatively small magazine size, I would not prioritize extended mags, but instead, damage and reload speed, particularly with the Fast plus P mag attachment, which grants a 30% increase in reload speed and increases damage by 10%. The only other alternative I would use is extended Fast mag, which grants a 50% increase in magazine capacity and 30% in reload speed. If not using a gold attachment, I would personally prioritize reload speed. This will be explained following our fully kitted discussion. As for the Uzi, I would apply the extended HP mag for an increased magazine capacity of 50% and bullet stumble by 50%. Without a gold attachment, then I would prioritize a bullet stumble attachment on its own. Sights for both weapons are technically up to preference, though I don't imagine going for anything beyond reflex and hollow sights, which increase movement speed while aiming down the sights. As for the stock attachment, I don't see much use in increasing ADS speed with SMGs, so I mainly gravitate toward a light tactical stock for an increase in swap speed and move speed, and I would apply this to both weapons. So ultimately, the main difference is in barrel and magazine attachments. Now, looking at the weapons in a practical sense, they are SMGs. Damage is not exactly what they are created for. If anything, mobility and close-ranged, fast-paced combat. The biggest threat to SMGs are mutations, and their greatest answer is offensive evasion or kiting. The last thing one would want to do when up against mutations is to stand and fire. Stick and move is the best protocol. This is mainly what influenced my choices regarding the attachments for both weapons. Looking at the Vector, I would consider it a waste of time to extend the mag capacity in hopes of turning it into a fighting weapon, but instead accept its stick and move orientation while increasing its intervals of fire by reducing the reload time and giving a small bonus to its damage. This works perfectly for tough mutations as the mag will deplete quickly, laying out a tactical blueprint for combating mutations. Shoot, reload and relocate, then rinse and repeat. Psychologically speaking, the Uzi would encourage standing and fighting, which would be a disadvantage. But with that said, giving it a bullet stumble attachment with its extended mag actually turns the weapon into a kiting and fighting hybrid. Not only will the weapon stumble mutations, but still have enough in its magazine to continue applying damage. Additionally, the reload speed is relatively nimble. Add on a long barrel for distance or a compensator for controllability, and the weapon should perform rather well. Overall, I can only come to two conclusions based on our two fronts of comparison. On a bare bones level, or minimal attachments level, I would say the Vector takes the victory, with greater ease of use and reliability. Damage over time is a loss, but a small one at that, and mobility goes to both weapons depending on whether one is using ADS or simply jogging. When fully kitted with personalized attachments, I would give the Uzi the victory. Its base attributes, mixed with attachments, can almost bring it to an AR standards, and when compared with the Vector, will have an easier time with mutations. Considering they are the greatest threat, this is rather significant. When fully kitted, both weapons come down to preference. Bare bones, however, accentuates their strengths and weaknesses. Now, I know deck builds can make alternative possibilities, but because of how versatile decks can be, that is a conversation far too complex for a discussion like this. But I'd love to hear from you guys as to what your take is on this comparison. Do you prefer the Vector or the Uzi? And if there are any disagreements, I welcome critical discussion, so feel free to leave your opinion on this comparison. But otherwise, that concludes the discussion. Thank you guys for joining me on this one, and in our next video, we'll be comparing the AA-12 and the Super 90 shotguns. It's been Londononion, and I will see you guys next time.